Rolling. Welcome to the Marble Media Podcast, where we talk about all things moving businesses from Web 2 to Web 3. It's also the 4DStory Podcast, where we talk about all things four-dimensional storytelling, which what we believe is going to be the social fabric that fits over Web 3 businesses. And so there we are. That's the introduction. Now let's get to it. You got to think back to Web 1, right? I was in Silicon Valley at the time, and I put web pages together I was a sales engineer and selling electronic components to all the engineers in Silicon Valley as the bubble was building, and after it burst as well. And we were building web pages to demonstrate our products, and a lot of our manufacturers were like, that's a waste of time. Get out there and sell our product. You are spending time in an area that's not going to matter. And of course, it did matter. Web 2 came along. We were able to create transactions. All of those same companies built giant databases and the ability to transact across their platform. And now we are embarking on Web 3. I'm going to be very straight up with you. Web 3 for me is a road bump. It's a speed bump into Web 4. I'm going to enlighten you on what Web 4 will be throughout this podcast because it's the only way I know to do it. However, what it is that I present to you is rooted in Web 3, and then there's a very clear demarcation between Web 3 and Web 4. And you say, hey, we don't even know what Web 4 is yet. And I know you don't, but I do. So stick with me in this podcast and allow me to cast a vision for you, even if it's through my own deranged viewpoint. Allow me to cast a vision that will give you perspective on how to approach Web 3. Pardon me. And I'm telling you, I'm not coming at this from a fly-by-night position. I'm not one of these people who went, whoo, NFTs are cool. What are we going to do with them? I'm one of these people that went, I have been waiting for this pretty much all my adult life. And so for the last 20 to 30 years, I've been developing what I will present to you in this podcast. And this is not just something that happened. And all of this is very well documented in books that I have on Amazon. Some have an ISBN, some are just Amazon Kindle books, vanity publishing. And I did it so that I could document where I was when I started thinking about all this, so that I could document where I was going. And of course, we know that when you document your life, when you print any idea that you have, you materialize it in the real world, and before you know it, manifestation happens, right? It follows. And so these are ethereal principles brought into the real world that pretty much all of us resonate around and recognize the importance of taking a thought, putting it on a piece of paper, and then taking it into the real world. Well, NFTs made it possible to bridge the gap from what I was thinking and my vision to the real world, and the blockchain and everything else brought that into play. So if you will follow me, I will show you what I've uncovered and how it applies, but I've taken it one step further and I've actually created a step-by-step process. So this podcast is for Marble Media, and we're going to talk about taking your business from Web 2 to Web 3. But in the same channel, I'll have different podcasts that will talk about 4DStory. And 4DStory is four-dimensional storytelling, and it's the idea of taking instead of telling a brand story, which, by the way, it's old, it's dead, nobody wants to hear it anymore. All right, that's my perspective. But as we get into Web 3, you're going to understand why the brand story is dead. And what's going to take its place is fiction, narrative, actually entertaining your clients while at the same time integrating your marketing into that entertainment. Hence, I've trademarked, and I think it was 6 years ago, the term story integrated marketing with specific parameters around it, because I knew that that's what would be necessary to guide us. So when we talk 4DStory, we're going to talk about NFTs in light of how to use them with characters and with entertainment and story, and we're going to get into how they can benefit musicians and artists and designers of all kinds in a way that you're not hearing in mainstream conversations about NFT collections, okay? This is a totally different way of thinking about it, because we start by telling a fictional story on social media. I mean, we 100% commit ourselves to a fictional story. Oh, I love talking about 4DStory. I got to get away from it. This is a Marble Media conversation. Let's get to it. At Marble Media, we help businesses go from Web 2 to Web 3, all right? In our perspective, but it's been well researched, and we believe it's a perspective that can be taken on by anybody and then, of course, adapted to what you are doing. So we give away our tools on marblemedia.io, which also will give you access to our Discord server where you can get additional information, etc. And we have a PDF on there that will guide you through 3 marbles, Marble Media, with 2 elements per marble. So a total of 6 steps, if you will, that you can process through when you think about a token community, whether it's a token, a social token you're using, or an NFT, and we'll get into what the differences are of those later, or however you structure it. And I think the other thing that will be important in this conversation will be showing you how your Web 2 business is currently very close to being a Web 3 business. You just have to put a few things in place to cause it to align, and then to be able to take advantage of the Web 3 infrastructure. By doing that, we take you from where you are to where you need to go to work in Web 3, and then that will set the stage for you to understand how you can leverage some Web 4 elements even now and gain real edge, ethereal edge in this process. But that not to be worried about to begin with. We create token communities and have brand named them, if you will, friendship pods. And it's because we believe that the purpose of a community going forward in Web3 is going to ultimately, foundationally, however you want to say it, it's going to be a community built around a centralized theme, okay, a belief system, if you will, and it's going to be pointed towards a social benefit, some sort of doing good in the world, whether it's through a nonprofit, a partnership, or however you bring it about. And so we call these friendship pods because the community is very tightly knit together. They prosper together. They share similar efficiency or similar interests, which lead to efficiencies. And with those efficiencies now, you can turn around and write against the framework of the world. You can write your line in the sand. You can make a difference. You can collectively do something for that impact. And I believe that this cycle of creating this theme, setting up this infrastructure, and going through the steps and living together in these type of token communities is going to give us the ability to make some serious positive impacts on the world. And if it does, well, then we have what we call friendship pods. We have the ability to gather together and do well and succeed as a result. What's beautiful about this entire scenario is once you set one up correctly, it starts to resonate like good harmony, like notes in a chord. And what happens is when it's resonating, it's doing something bigger than all the components individually can do. And it's creating something that is exciting and prosperous and worth committing to and spending time on. And the result is we can break through some major barriers as a byproduct. And I always call it the 1 + 1 = 3 formula. Right? We put the components together, we put them together correctly, we start serving in that capacity, and the outcome is a bigger element than we ever could have imagined, a bigger result. Now you say, this is what organizations always do. You're absolutely right. This is what they do in Web 2, but they do it in a very disjoined way and have to struggle and work very hard to create a brand message that resonates with all their products, all their divisions, all their departments, all the kind of people that come that buy their product. And it becomes difficult to get very far into the innate fabric of your customers' lives, because to some degree you have to be all things to all people in this way, and you're targeting a customer, you're targeting a demographic, and then trying to serve that demographic. This flips it on its head, and this says we are going to, instead of know our customer, we need to know ourselves. And we need to know it so well that we can create a theme and an infrastructure based on these 6 principles out of these 3 marbles to support it. And when we do, well, now we built a friendship pod where only people that resonate with our message are aligned with us. And the result of that, it's the reason underdogs win Super Bowls, right? As we come up on Super Bowl weekend here soon. It's the idea that if you can act as a team, you can do something bigger and better and more consistent. And that's what Web3 offers. The blockchain takes away the ambiguity of trust. If I build smart contracts into my decision making, it's built on a very solid proposal, business plan, a Web3 skeleton, then everyone knows this is going to mean that. Well, as a result, you can now start to collectively move forward at an exponential pace because you've taken away the ambiguity of trust, and everybody is kind of in it to win it. You know what I'm saying? So we are going to take all those ideas and we're going to shape them, and we're going to call it friendship pods, and we're going to do one better, but we're going to let you follow us as we build a friendship pod type of environment. And by the way, you don't tell the world, welcome to our friendship pod. That's just what we brand name it on the back end because we want you to realize this is more than just technology, and it's more than just business. It's philosophical, it's belief systems, it's passion, it's entertainment, it's imagination. It's all those things combined into one. But when you get it right, you provide something that will absolutely revolutionize how you show up every single day to do your work, to serve your fan base, your collective community, and dare I say, make your life better. Isn't that why we try to move forward? And so with that introduction, allow me to read the first paragraph of the PDF that I implore you to go download at marblemedia.io. This is our 3 marble guide. A Web3 friendship pod is a crypto community designed to add value and generate utility. Those are 2 very important things to continually recognize as you build towards a Web3 community. Are you adding value and are you adding utility? Is there functionality and purpose in everything that you're doing? And is it all focused on through the exact same lens so that when people receive it, if you can think of it as a frequency, they're able to discern it. And the result of that is better than a brand story. It's what a brand story attempts to do and oftentimes nails pretty well. But when a brand story does it, it does it built in the Web 2 economy, where email marketing is going to support it, where funnels and landing pages and advertising, paid advertising is going to support it. Although some of that is carried on into Web 3 and although some of that is overlapped during the transition, idealistically, that is not how we approach the coming economy. The coming economy demands that we build a honeypot, a beehive, I like to call it. And the bees that are attracted to how we built that beehive will be our customers, and they will show up. They'll be our community members. They'll be sharing in the experience that we are producing across the blockchain. And so value and utility has a different meaning in Web 3 than it did Web 2. In Web 2, it meant this is what I'm going to give you to compel you to come to me. In Web 3, this says this is what I have. And if you're compelled to come in, well, then those are the only ones that I want. They're the only ones that I need. They're the ones that matter because they're the ones that are going to ultimately allow me to make this thing resonate. And so you're going to discover that Web 3 has more of a magnetic kind of marketing approach, more of an attractive approach, and less of a let me shove it down your throat approach. And I believe that this sort of a mentality is going to permeate for sure the conversation before long, and businesses are going to scramble to figure out how to turn themselves into a properly structured Web3, which means on the blockchain, utilizing common, more up-to-date communication devices and approaches, and terminology is going to be a big piece, in order to run their businesses. And they're going to recognize what they're really about and what they're doing. And it's all going to come down to value and utility. Using NFTs and social tokens, I guess you could mint your own crypto coin as well, but that's like the tier, NFTs here, social tokens here, and your own coin up here. But once you mint a coin, you're really kind of moving into another dimension, because that's fungible, and that works a different way, even though there is some trade-off. But just to give you that insight. And this will allow creators to gather people together, and creators could be business owners, they could be artists, it could be musicians, a variety, pretty much anybody is a creator, just depending on the vortex they're coming in through. And to gather people together through an infrastructure that organizes connections. Now, that's the important thing. You have to get to a point where you trust the fact that a Web3 properly designed friendship pod or token community is built in such a way that it naturally and organically organizes the connections that you desire. And you'll see how this works as we move through. And it happens between them in an ethereal, digital, and physical way. This is actually 4DStory, the 4 dimensions that we target. I'm sorry, this isn't 4D, this is Marble Media, but in 4DStory, the 4 dimensions that we target is that human physical dimension, the digital crypto dimension, the ethereal dimension, and then the human persona dimension. When we bring all 4 of those into sharp focus, we start to resonate unconsciously and innately with our followers, with our community members, and everybody does this like naturally, and we have all these and I say Web 2, but old world, however you want to look at it, we have all these approaches, right? Knowing your customer's target, understanding them, taking them through a customer journey. All these things are meant to try to get a handle on this very element of these 4 dimensions, so that when they resonate together, we get that exponential response from people where they are just gladly buying our products and participating, right, in our journey. But the problem is in Web 2, you do it for a while and then it falls apart because things change. You do it for a while, it falls apart because things change. In a Web 3 economy, you have the ability, especially with a 4-dimensional story, to attach to all these 4 dimensions, bring them together, and then manage that unity rather than all the components that feed the unity. Why? Well, it's very simple, because you can now. With the blockchain, it's possible to just manage that and let the infrastructure serve that, rather than spending all your time serving the infrastructure, hoping to occasionally create that gestalt with your community or with your customers. And the essence of all of this sounds like jargon, but at the end of the day, this is the true nature of decentralization. It's the ability that any one person or an entire corporation or a nation can manage their influence in the same way. Will money and power and location still come into play? Yes, in many different ways, especially as the metaverse continues to emerge. And man, we tend to have our means of creating chokeholds so that we can pull things to us. And I'll be honest, 4DStory and Marble Media are both very idealistic approaches that include the philosophy, that include the philanthropy in the business model. But I believe, honestly, that this is where everybody is going, and eventually it will become status quo, and it'll be the way that we approach building a business. Of course, you've heard this in different ways many times before, so I'm not telling you anything new. So you can grow collectively towards a common goal. So you end up with the physical, the digital / crypto, the ethereal, which is more 4DStory. We get into that later. And then the human persona, the human element. And we have means in our infrastructure to bond these together. So if you get that from that very high philosophical level, then you can work backwards. And we have a process, like I said, in this PDF that we're going to go through to better understand how to work backwards. It's also called the Fourth Industrial Revolution. That's just because it comes into, play that way. But it's also called Web 3 at this point in time. And it includes things like the blockchain, cryptocurrency, DAOs or DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, virtual influencers, the metaverse, omniverse, everything from robots and Neuralinks to technologies like AI, AR, VR, QR, NFT, NFC. If you do not know what any of these acronyms are, don't worry. It's part of the process. It takes 6 months in any industry. I remember the first time I started selling mortgages before the big bubble busted. I became an account executive, and I was lost for 6 months because all the jargon and all the communication devices that would give me a sense of building up an image in my head were all foreign to me. And so the first thing I had to do was learn the vocabulary. But guess what? You can't just sit down and learn vocabulary, especially in your adult life, quite as easily as you can just expose yourself to it. And so I encourage you to keep exposing yourself to this conversation, and you can do that here on this podcast. Why not? But all of these elements are going to start resonating together, and there's more. There's things in the world of biology and chemistry that are starting to infiltrate, and DNA sequencing and all these things, right? But let's stick with the ones that are probably most pertinent to the business that you are building. One of the things that I'm looking to do is to help the small independent businesses. Now, the things that I'm telling you here, again, a nation can build their own community, digital community, crypto community around these same ideals. But I create strategies for the small business because what I'm seeing in the industry is that as crypto is continuing to manifest itself, there are some pretty large hurdles to get into it. And those hurdles are starting to kind of get broken down by different intermediary companies. MintGate is an amazing one that allows you to create gated NFTs, which we are going to utilize in this podcast and across this process. They let you create these minted or gated NFTs so that you can create a membership zone and offer all kinds of things through those gates. And that's part of this formula. So different social media platforms are starting to emerge on the blockchain, like Twetch, Twetch, and that's where you're actually, every time you put a social post on their servers, you're writing it to the blockchain. Therefore, you're paying along the way, but you also get paid every time somebody likes or shares your product or your content. And the result of that is that you don't need ads to support the platform. That's a big one. And you own all of your own content. It's written on the blockchain, tied to your MetaMask, to your wallet and your profile, etc. And so this changes the way we approach just about everything that we're doing. But the fundamental challenge with Web3 is also the main opportunity. The fact that all these aforementioned technologies are converging upon us at the same time, and it's overwhelm. And if you're listening to me right now, I talk a mile a minute. It's because there's a lot to say. But I hope I'm engaging you and allowing the frequency of my voice and the words that I use to unconsciously stir you towards an awareness that you need to get on board and start understanding how to pull this thing apart and apply it to what it is that you are doing. By the way, if you're thinking about creating an NFT collection, I'm going to make all these conjectural statements that probably get a million comments, people saying, you're an idiot, you don't know what you're talking about, but hey, a million comments of that is better than, no comments. So I'll take it. And you're not telling me anything I don't know, right? But I believe that with all these things converging upon us and everybody getting confused and not understanding that they're falling into old patterns. And so we see these NFT collections. Somebody creates an NFT collection, they put it out on the web, they create a bunch of hype, drive you to a whitelist on Discord, and little by little put the carrot in front of you to say this NFT collection is going to be amazing if we just get to this point and that point. It's kind of like, hey, go out there, make a bunch of money, bring it back to me, and I'll give you some. Yeah, well, that doesn't work anymore. You get fed up with that real quick, right? So the idea that all of these things that are happening are confusing people are causing them to move back into some old habits. And what we see is they're they're offering Web3 things in a Web2 mentality. And I'm going to have to come up with a buzz term for that, although I'm full of buzz terms, because it happens so often. You constantly see this Web3 conversation happening in Web2 footing. I mean, they're standing in Web2 talking about Web3. You can clearly see they're looking across a great chasm. Rather than standing on the shores of Web3, realizing that they've come across, and then going, wow, the promised land is so promising. And I think if you find yourself frustrated, you're standing on the shores of Web 2 looking across to Web 3. And I implore you to come across to Web 3 and look at it from there, and you'll see it in a different light. How do you get there? Well, you really do have to you got to part the Red Sea to get there. You've got to learn this stuff as far as just what it sounds like in your head, what it means, and get active on get yourself a wallet, get you some Ethereum and some Matic, and all. You're going to learn about all these different coins, Polygon, etc. Get some of those in these wallets and start moving towards this direction that you're being pushed towards, whether you know it or not. And if you're listening to this podcast, something pushed you. If it's the first time, something pushed you this way, I promise you. And it's not easily identifiable because it's a lot like a stream or a flow, a river that is moving, and you're getting caught up in it. Get caught up in it and say, I'm going to embrace it, so that I can understand it and take control. Hey, if you want to be on that river in a raft without a rudder, that's up to you. But I'm offering you a rudder, I'm offering you sail power, and I'm offering you engine power, okay? And of course, it'll probably have to be electrical power in our day and age. But this is where we are, and with all these things happening, we need to think like Web3 entrepreneurs rather than Web 2. And thanks for letting me lay down that foundation, because I will refer back to that pretty continuously. As digital currencies find more and more acceptance, they are fast becoming the catalyst that bridges all the technologies into one massive shift in how business is done, marketing is accomplished, and revenue is generated. We have conversations, and will have conversations on all three of those: the operational side of the business, the marketing aspect of it, and how you generate revenue. And let me tell you, the sky is the limit. There is untold potential. Literally, this idea of decentralization kind of gives a sense that everyone's going to be able to prosper, and there will be no gatekeepers that keep you from accessing that prosperity. And if I can help it, that's exactly what I'm going to arm you with and empower you with, so that even if the rest of the world, we were having a conversation this morning, there's going to be those, and there already are, natural chokeholds happening in this idealistic, decentralized economy. But if I can empower you to avoid them and not be subject to them, even still be able to utilize them as part of your overall strategy, then I have done my job, because this is what we're all passionate about. We need to break the bonds, and we need to be able to be free again, right? As we're seeing so many freedoms disappear, not to get down that road, but let's move along. When that happens, we don't know if fiat currency will fall apart in one day, or if it will be a gradual changeover. Now, right now, we're quite a ways down the road into this Bitcoin crypto world. So there is a lag, there is a gray area, there is a overlapping of this crypto economy to the fiat economy, if I can draw the lines there. The question is, will this gray area, will this whole thing metastasize gradually in a way that we have enough time to catch our breath? Or will it do that for a while, and then suddenly, and I always refer to disco, will suddenly fiat currency hit a wall in the hearts and minds and speculation levels of Wall Street, and suddenly in one day, fiat currency crumble, inflation goes through the roof, and suddenly crypto becomes 100% where everybody goes? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. I think that's what's going to happen. I think there's going to be an exponential acceptance, and then all of a sudden a pooper get off the pot kind of day situation, week, like we saw the markets fall apart during in '08 during the crash of the real estate market that nobody dreamed could possibly happen, right? And we saw the cataclysmic level of energy that just sucked the life out of so many people. Well, that just tells me it can happen. I'm hedging against that and trying to help you hedge against that by having a game plan towards how you're going to approach this new economy. And maybe you have a little buffer time to kind of put your toes in the water and tap dance a little bit before you have to fully commit. And that's good because it gives you time to, like I said, take 6 months to get all of this kind of into you. But you may not have that time. So that's totally speculation that we have to manage by reading what's going on, watching the news, and have a really good idea and understanding of what Web3 is all about. And I believe that's the difference. Understand what it's about, build your own community so that you have a little bit of skin in the game, and you'll definitely be able to sense when and where you need to make changes or go with the flow or adapt metaverse, AR, VR, whatever the case may be. That's how I want to empower you. So at the moment, the shift is happening gradually but picking up speed. So for the sake of our stress levels in this podcast and in this conversation, and because we don't need to go down that scary dark hole, let's assume the least fateful scenario unfolds. The transition to a cashless society is painless. Let's just assume the best transition to this crypto economy exists and happens. And we don't know what's going to happen when nation states start minting their own coin, and how policy is going to play out, and regulation, and all of these aspects. So we're going to take a little bit of a sterile approach until things are written in stone, and we're going to push the limits of what's possible so that we can then back down to whatever is functional and necessary when the time comes. But if I can take your mind and expand it, then you can always do your own backing down. So the question becomes, then what? What happens when it does transition, whether it's all at once or a smooth transition? I cannot tell you when it's going to happen, but everybody that's looking at it constantly sees the day is approaching faster and faster. Is it 6 months? Is it 16 months? Is it 3 years? I don't think it's too much beyond that, okay? But what happens when it actually does come about? Well, once this changeover fully takes place, making money and spending it will change forever. And so there are conversations about labor in the metaverse, which is part of this on a much bigger scale. There are conversations about how these communities will shape up and how people will organize themselves nationally. And once there is this economic ecosystem that's on the blockchain and it is worldwide, what does that look like? Okay, so these are all very big questions, but it definitely will change how you spend money. In fact, if you are currently in the world of crypto, you have a certain arrogance about you, and it's well-deserved and justified. Now, I don't mean that there is an attitude that comes across and that it's damaging in any way. What I mean is you have a mindset and a way of thinking that no longer works in the world of Web 2 or old paradigms such as email marketing and paid ads and all of these things. And I know you still probably are using them. I'm not saying that's gone away, but what I'm saying is passwords. Just let me click my MetaMask and I'm in. I'd prefer to own a gated NFT than to have to remember a stinking password. There is a freedom that comes with it. There's something about clicking that button that says, yep, you have just been, without any other interruption in your life, you have been quantified and verified across the world and across the blockchain, and that record is permanent, and so now you may move on. I mean, it's just a liberating feeling to know that you don't have to build a membership site and go through all this minutia of trying to make everybody like your graphic. You can just put up a Discord server and start engaging people. Now, you can go the other route, but hey, why would we go the other route when we have a more efficient way? And this efficient mindset is really starting to take hold and to actually be the preferred mindset. So everything will change. You will change the way that you think about money. You will change the way you think about investment. You'll change the way you think about community, friends, friendships, relationships, etc. And everything will work in conjunction with that. The Internet of Things will 100% become represented by NFTs, and those NFTs will be in the metaverse. And beyond that, who knows? But let me tell you, it's all going to come back to these very basic principles of Web3 that I'm going to give you in this podcast. And if you go download my PDF, which I'm just simply going through in these first podcasts, I'm going to go through it so that you're able to kind of hear an exasperated insight on what it is that I'm serving you with. And then we will show you how that plays out in what we're doing here. Where is here? I'm going to get to that in just a second. Let me just finish this last set of thoughts. Going to a cash machine and pulling out $20 will be a thing of the past. In fact, now I live in a small rural town, northern Washington, 50 miles south of the Canadian border. And January 1st, I don't know if it was that actual day I was gone in California, but when I came back, there was a machine in the local grocery store, the local IGA grocery store, that allows you to put in cash and transfer it to crypto. And I thought, who in this town's going to do that? And it wasn't long before I found a need for going and using that machine. And so the idea of getting $20 is going to change. The idea of utilizing cash is going to change, but it's not just that. There is a fiat mindset and there is a Bitcoin or a crypto mindset. And we'll talk more about the differences between that, but just be aware that they exist. And it's part of what keeps people from making the shift, because that's change and it hurts. But once you make the shift, it's amazing how you don't want to go back. In the small town we live in, the ATM machine at Cash Bank, at Chase Bank, is always broken. Like, it's constantly out of money. It's constantly needing to be serviced. And to me, the reason is, because we live in a small town, we're on the fringe of all of this. That particular ATM machine doesn't get serviced because they're going to be out of style before too long, right? That wouldn't necessarily now happen in a big town, but it reminds me of how the payphones faded away. Too often, once cell phones hit the scene, and definitely the iPhone, fewer and fewer payphones were seen, and the ones that you did see were beat up, broken, dilapidated. The last payphone I think I used was on Highway 17 going to Santa Cruz from San Jose, and it was sitting on the top of the route there, and it was really worn down but still worked. And then at some point during my time in Northern California, it just disappeared. And so that's kind of what I perceive with these cash machines and how that will happen. In the local, I talked about all that. And so if this is evident in our tiny little 1,500 person town, I'm thinking it's happening where you live as well. And you just need to wake up to it, start seeing it, start recognizing it. I'm not asking you to jump into the crypto boat. I'm not entirely a fan of crypto or a cashless society. However, I recognize it's going there, and I don't want to be caught without a rudder. So let me implore you, let me entice you, let me encourage you and influence you and motivate you. All right, all the adjectives I can think of. Get off the couch and start learning about this stuff so that you at least understand what's happening, because I don't want to see what could happen if you get hit upside the head without being prepared. And so by the time you hear this podcast, read my PDF, some of this may be old news. It may be old hat by the time you actually get around to this. But hey, at least you got around to it, right? And so starting and running a small business will change. And with that, we're going to leave the PDF and just move back into this conversation, or this idea that we are going to demonstrate for you how to convert from Web 2 to Web 3 in a very simple business. Locally here, we have a restaurant that is a brats and beer pub, and it's called the Dog House. And Tyson, you'll meet Tyson here on the podcast. He runs the place, and it's an awesome place. They're starting to add music and live events and poetry reading and storytelling and doing a lot of things to engage the community. And they have been doing this over the past few years, except for the interruption of COVID. to get themselves in a position to offer the community the greatest value. But now with the onslaught of Web3, they need to transition to a community token that allows for more interaction. But the beauty of that is it creates a single place for the whole community to resonate around and to come together and to prosper and benefit from what it is that the Doghouse has to offer. And they offer a number of things already, but let me tell you, the conversion to Web3 is going to make the many different things they offer easier to manage and bring them all into one central storyline that is also being supported by a four-dimensional story called Nightshades, which we'll talk about in the 4DStory world, and we'll use Nightshades as a template to show you how 4DStory can impact the infrastructure of a 3-marble Web3 friendship pod. All right.
Matt. But then the guy in the brisket in the ground has his token attached to the Doghouse guy, and then he has friends.
Do me a favor, use this.
And then there's somewhere over here. So that's the Doghouse, and that's barbecue.
Redraw those circles. Just trace them so we can see.
So it really connects the. So eventually, what we need is that the guy 2, that these connect, right? And then, so then there's the club. But if he does something valuable, then he gets some credit for it.
The rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah, right now, you know, Facebook owns all of this.
Yeah.
And none of us get shit. But if we, it's the benefit that I see of this whole game is that everybody's interconnected, and hopefully bubbles outside of our world too. What do they call that map? They call that map something.
Oh, well, this is just mind mapping.
Mind mapping, yeah.
Essentially. And what's funny is, I don't know where the picture is, but I'll have to find it. I have a very similar picture that I drew on my whiteboard last year with my son. I made a video, and it looked just like this. So you definitely are on the right track.
Yeah.
Yep.
Guy too. And then he shares the recipes that we have from here.
Yep. And your story, this is a story. So the 4DStory lays on top of it as a fictional story so that you can manipulate, right, characters and whatever. But this is the real story. You've just written the plot. But the beautiful thing is you didn't just come up with a plot. These are individual story plot lines that exist that when they bring it to you, now all of a sudden you guys are telling a bigger story. And then when you characterize it in 4DStory, it becomes something even bigger. But this is the essence of it. And so it's dynamic, and it's based on relationships and community, and it's beautiful.
It would be interesting to go get like 10 sheets of vellum and draw it out and then show it.
Yeah, that would. Actually, draw another one. Put the Doghouse in a new circle. And draw an extension to the tattoo parlor, who is coming up with a new character called Athena. And this is just our how the Doghouse is currently connecting. And we will very soon have a character for Crafted. And you are bringing Crafted into your storefront, which the studio is currently decorated with. And there's, just put NFT. There are NFT collections that we are connecting with to bring them. We won't, huh?
Marble?
No, just write the word NFT. These are NFT collections that we are going to bring into our story as characters. Put Marble Media, MM. And then we have a variety of others around that are put music, because we have someone who's doing music events, and or you put Gilles connected here. We've got a Bitcoin mining operation that is now being connected to us. We eventually will have our 4D retreats out of here. And so what you're seeing is this natural growth. And it won't be long before they start connecting with one another through us. And then that's where the dynamic of the kinetic response from kinetic avatars, that idea comes from. And the hop shot, and on and on and on it goes. Then you got the chamber, yep. And so once all of these...
Notice I drew the city way over on the side. Outside of our circle.
And once you have your coin, you're able... There's something that connects all... The coin becomes the node to all these different entities. Yep. And that right there, nicely done. That is a Web3 organization around a single token and what it ends up looking like. And it can get as...
That's pretty exciting.
But it's organic. That's the cool part. We create a means by which to connect all these nodes, and then we let the connections happen, and that's what creates the environment of a Web3 friendship pod. You just drew friendship pods. Beautiful. And so this, so far what we have done is we rebuilt their website, and the website before was informational. It still is in a lot of ways because we kind of got to stay in the Web 2 world, but we've integrated more of the theme of the doghouse and more of the entertainment aspect, and we've exposed the 4DStory to the homepage. We have you would call it a blog, but a place, more or less a blog for the story that allows us to put insights and other elements directly hanging off their main website. And we've also told our community that we are moving forward in this idea of having a tokenized community. Now, we live in an area that raises beef and apple orchards. I mean, these are ranchers. These are not people that are going to gravitate to crypto very easily. However, what we're noticing is an influx of city folk living here, and city folk. I came from San Francisco area, Northern California, but I'm now country. Well, anyhow, let me just say that we are not the most likely place to adapt this new age technology. But what I believe we are is a couple of things. First of all, we're an incredible community full of lots of talent. And when I say talent, I'm talking about storytelling talent and production talent and music and art and painting and lots of authors. This place is saturated with that. Number two, we are a beautiful area and we have lots to offer, everything from rivers and lakes to fishing, camping, hiking, take any kind of a motor vehicle on the water, out in the mountains, up in the air. We can go skydiving. We have Chelan, which has more wineries than Napa and is a beautifully laid out city or town. We have a number of contributors in this area that will give us the ability to host retreats and teach this stuff in a very hands-on kind of way and create an amazing experience for those that participate. And so we are probably the furthest that you would ever expect, and you're going to see this studio constantly in flux because there's all kinds of stuff laying around here because we're all utilizing this space to get out, right? Our message and to put this together, but it's harmonizing, and that harmony is so invaluable. And so the Doghouse is a local restaurant that we're going to use as a model and show you how you can slowly adapt. And by the way, when I say you need to adapt quickly, I'm talking about in your head. You can adapt your business incrementally and survive. I don't think you're going to have to all in one fell swoop. Maybe at some point it would look like that, or people would have you believe that, but I think you're going to have time to be able to implement the steps and little by little, because you're never going to stop. Once you build a community, it's all about enhancing your offer till the day you are done, right? So you'll be able to step through this, and we're going to take you on this ride. And so the Doghouse we redid the website. We started talking about what kind of things they can offer their community along these 3 marbles in order to support the token, and we've gone through the process of creating their theme and creating their token, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's a token that can be benefited by the local community because they can come into the restaurant and receive all kinds of different elements to that token, free cheesecake or whatever. But it's also beneficial worldwide because if you follow this 4D story, you're going to be brought into all kinds. If you follow the 4D story, you'll be brought into all kinds of relationships that we're pulling together. You can also own the token and have access to things that we can deliver, ship, make available online, etc. So suddenly this little tiny restaurant in this faraway town seemingly has access to the whole world. Not that they didn't before, because they can always make products and ship them. That's nothing new. But it's, again, the fact that they're able to be themselves and to build this honeycomb in a way that it's efficient and not so frustrating for them to try to kind of keep rebuilding and create this flow, which is a big piece of the Web3 Friendship Pod approach, to create a systematic flow to where it's so efficient that it's a joy to run a business again, all right? That's just kind of what we're all after if you're in business for yourself. So I'm an evangelist for this. I am very charged up about it, as you can tell maybe. I have put together as much infrastructure as I can and will continue, because Marble Media has its own community, right? And you buy my token, you get access to a lot of help to be able to do this. And but that is what it is. If you connect with our community, I offer as many free. I will give you as much to do it on your own as I possibly can. It won't matter to me, because what I'm here for is the end result. And the end result is for the transition to happen without the little guy being left behind, okay? And I'm the little guy. I don't own a major social media platform or any kind of technology company. And so I empathize, and I want to take that empathy, put it into action, bring together all of this. If you will check out marblemedia.io and 4DStory.com, and then engage and allow me to utilize you as a backstop and hear you and implement your ideas. And you're going to meet Tyson. We sit around and brainstorm, and it's amazing what comes out of that. Would love to have that same interaction with a fan base and a community that's excited about moving from Web 2 to Web 3 and chasing after some of these high ideals and implementing them, and then seeing how they play out in the real world. And I promise you, this is where it's going. NFTs you cannot put a collection out there. I'm getting into the 4D story world, but you can't put a collection out there really anymore without some value and utility behind it. You can't run a business without it looking like a community based on a token in the future, in Web 3. And so get it, embrace it, and keep coming back here and let me keep encouraging you. And hopefully at some point we'll get to meet each other. And when we do, you can tell me about all your successes. And I'll get your token, you get mine, and we'll share in them. All right, this is Marble Media, marblemedia.io. This time, it's for all the marbles.